Good evening, everyone. I'm Titash, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to Kolkata Center for Creativity's talk series Artist to Entrepreneur Season 2, Talk 1, with today's speaker, one of India's leading choreographers and dancers, and an environmental and social activist, and the honorary director of Darpana Academy of Performing Arts, Ms. Mallika Sarabhai, at the first of 2021's capacity building conversation Artist to Entrepreneur Season 2. Kolkata Center for Creativity is a multidisciplinary interactive arts center located in Kolkata that works for inclusivity, capacity building, and well-being for artists and different communities in society through presentation, promotion, appreciation, and application of different art disciplines in cultural landscape of contemporary India since its inception in November 2018. Our Artist to Entrepreneur Talk series is a need of time that we responded eagerly with sincerity. In the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, the field of art that has been run by public participation, patronage, and grants immediately started to face scarcity of resources. Now, as we lived in the situation for almost a year, the challenges do not seem just financial, as digitalization is posing many questions of agency and censorship as well in the art organizational sector. In the second season, KCC aims to find out the right questions to ask the right resources for manifest significant change. For this, having conversation and guidance from pioneers like today's guest seems essential. Today's guest, Ms. Mallika Sarabhai, doesn't need an introduction, but anyway, I'm going to say a few words. She has been one of India's leading choreographers and dancers for over 4 decades, in constant demand as a soloist, and with her own dance company, Darpana. She has been creating and performing both classical and contemporary works. She has also produced over 3,000 hours of television work, talking of issues on environment, women, communal harmony, and violence using most popular genres of TV. She has a PhD in organizational behavior and has been honorary director of Darpana Academy of Performing Arts for over 40 years. Always an activist for social education and women's empowerment, Mallika began using her work for social change. In 1989, she created the first of her hard-hitting solo theatrical works, Shakti, the Power of Women. Since then, Mallika has created numerous stage productions which have raised awareness, highlighted crucial issues, and advocated change, several on which productions have toured internationally, as well as throughout India. In mid-90s, Mallika began to develop her own contemporary dance vocabulary and went on to create short and full-length works, which has been presented in India and over 50 other countries. In conversation with Ms. Sarabhai today, we have our Director of Kolkata Center for Creativity, Ms. Reena Dewan. She has been spearheading many projects in KCC to promote research, development, and different disciplines of art that leads to a volumetric and qualitative impact, not only in the art field, but also in the society and especially to the young artists and performers. Reena champions and facilitates inclusion, diversity, and gender equality in museum and art spaces. She's pioneering social change, creating an inclusive culture in KCC that addresses different abilities and choices, gender and sexual diversity, and marginalized communities through appreciation and application of art. I would request Reena ma'am to please take over the conversation from here.
A very, very warm welcome to you, Mallika. It's a great moment for us to be here. And today is, I think, the next 1 hour is going to be full of learnings for all of us. And we are going to revisit this conversation again and again and take notes from this in future also. I'll straight away plunge into the questions that I have in mind, which are so many, but I have tried to restrict myself as much as possible. 66 years is a very long time for an independent art organization to stay active and create consistent socio-cultural impact. I think it is imperative for me to ask you to share with the art leaders the driving points that made this happen.
I think and we are 71 years old this year. When my mother Mrinalini Sarabhai settled in Gujarat because she married my father, except for Bengal, the rest of India north of Gujarat was really bereft of any kind of classical dance, except for Kathak in the courts of Lucknow. And she found that there was really no understanding of the arts at all. And my father felt very much that if she wanted to cultivate an understanding and an audience, she would have to start teaching dance. And my mother didn't want to teach at all. She wanted to dance and she wanted to create. But that's how Darpana got born. And for the first few years, there were no students because people thought this was Notch and not any kind of spiritual dance, which the southern styles are. And slowly, slowly, she started touring, and young girls started coming, and an audience was built up. I think what happened in the early years of Darpana is, one is that they were touring constantly. The second is that other art forms who couldn't find a home came to my mother and said, can we have a home in Darpana? And that's how Gujarati theatre, which was faltering, started here with the able guidance of two extraordinary actors, Kailash Pandya and Damini Mehta. Then Mrs. Meher Contractor, who was a puppeteer of international repute, also came here searching for a home. So the puppet department started. A few years later, there was away, and they found a home in Darpana, and then a research project started. So in some senses, while keeping a core of where she wanted to go, Amma also became a home for a lot of other things, which also grew in their own ways. I grew up learning dance, learning theatre, learning puppetry, but never wanting to do dance professionally because I was a lazy, fat child and didn't want to move so much. And I saw in my mother just how much hard work went behind the scene before you got to the stage. So it wasn't till later that I really accidentally came into the idea of wanting to be a professional dancer. In the early years, it was my father's businesses that sustained Darpana. In the first Indian Parliament, Pandit Nehru set up a Ministry of Culture, and Darpana was one of the early institutions that became party to that ministry, and we were getting some funding from there. By the time I joined in late 76, early 77, politics had changed, and I had come straight from a PhD in organizational behavior. And I thought that it's not safe to be dependent on the government, because one day the government might turn around and say, you can't do that because it's not convenient to us. So I was very sure that I had to find another channel of sustaining Darpana. Yes, we had students, but Amma had always believed that money shouldn't stop a child from learning. So we had at our greatest strength close to 700 students, but the fees were like 50 rupees, 40 rupees, and then half of them were scholarship students. So that didn't bring in anything, or certainly not enough to sustain such a large company, and there were a lot of people then. And I spent the first few years trying to find an alternative. Finding support for dance, for arts has always been difficult. Once the temples and the Maharajas went, what the government gave was paltry, and even that dribbled out. So I had decided that I would find another alternative, and I have just been very, very fortunate that I myself as a performer was hugely in demand. And because I had decided right at the beginning of my career that I would not take even 1 rupee of what I earned as a dancer, and that everything should go into sustaining Darpana, we have really managed to float on that till the present government came into power. And I have had major political differences when the Prime Minister was part of Gujarat and leading Gujarat. and our fortunes changed. And suddenly, from being hugely in demand, we became the pariahs, untouchables. So the last 6 years have been extremely difficult. It also coincided with a time when the city of Ahmedabad, to build a riverfront road, took away our theatre. It just sliced the land and took away the stage, and we were left with the seating but no stage. And we decided to rebuild. The theatre was first built in '94 as a tribute to what Amma had done for the city of Ahmedabad, and we named it Natarani, and it went straight into the river Sabarmati. There was no back. You could see the river if you didn't have a curtain up, and this got cut off. So the minute the financial crunch started was when we decided to rebuild the theatre. So the last 5 years have been pretty hellish, and then COVID. So just when we had restarted Natrani and were having a wonderful season presenting art, still not sustainable economically, but very beautiful in what we were being able to present, then COVID struck, and we are struggling in many different ways. You know, if you want to say what you want to say and you don't want to follow a particular government line or a particular political line, things are always difficult. And then when something like COVID starts and all funding stops, and a lot of people that we have been sustaining, I work with a lot of folk artists and we sustain them by giving them work, by collaborating and so on, and all that dries up, the whole arts world goes into a spin. There have been several countries like Germany and several Scandinavian countries and New Zealand who have said to the artists, we will fund you for 1 year, don't worry about how you will sustain yourself, but we will fund you, just go and reinvent yourself. I wish somebody had said that to us, but we are trying to reinvent ourselves at this moment. So we had a lucky 40 years when my earnings and the company's earnings as a performer and a performing group could sustain all our other activities. And as you know, we have a lot of other activities and we will speak about them, but we could sustain them. We were the sort of backers for a lot of experimentation, for a lot of rural work, for a lot of work taking the arts to talk about issues of violence and issues of gender and so on. But that is no longer the case, and we have to work towards finding a sustainable model that we can then share with the world and say, you know, this is the way to go. Reena?
It was a hell of a journey. Yeah, indeed. So taking from where you just left, you know, that you said that there was puppetry that came into play when your mother started. And after that, slowly, it also became an institute which was instrumental for training of performing art, women empowerment, rural development, gender sensitization, and human rights movement. So, was there any transitional friction while bringing different disciplines together of different intentions to a common ground?
Okay, so the way it happened was, when Amma married and came to Gujarat, of course she spoke no Gujarati. So in the early 60s, she was learning Gujarati, and she had a very astute teacher who would teach her to read Gujarati from a Gujarati newspaper. And Amma started reading news items about young brides in Saurashtra very soon after their marriage jumping into wells to kill themselves. And she started asking around about this and got acquainted with the whole idea of dowry and dowry violence. And she was deeply troubled by this. So in 1963, she used Bharatanatyam, which basically talks of Shringara, to talk about hatred and violence and the tormenting of young brides. And the story goes that she took this piece, which is called Memory is a Ragged Fragment of Eternity, to Delhi. And Pandit Nehru had worked very closely with her mother, and they were fellow Congressites and fellow signers of the Constitution and so on. So he would often drop in to see Amma dance, and he came and he saw this piece and said, what is this piece about? And that is when he constituted the first inquiry into what we today call dowry deaths. And I grew up with this impression that a dance piece could lead to such a social change. Now, happily, when Kailash Bhai and Damini Ben started the drama department, they came from IPTA, the Indian People's Theatre Association, which already had an agenda of using theatre for social change. Mrs. Contractor came and was very interested again in the whole field of development. So many years later, when I came into Darpana and I was very interested in development, I found that somebody in the puppetry department was doing work with development, somebody in the theatre department similarly, Amma similarly. And I thought that this is a synergy that needs to be created. Why should somebody who goes to Mrs. Contractor only get a puppet project? Perhaps it's time to combine these. So, in 1980, I started a new department in Darpana called Darpana for Development, and said to the entire community at Darpana, whoever is interested in experimenting and researching and finding ways to communicate different ideas can join here as an additional thing. So, the transition luckily for me was very easy, and there were so many people deeply committed to it that we ended up saying, okay, X message needs to be given to Y. What is the best way of doing it? And we stopped being in these silos of this is theatre and that therefore they'll do theatre, or this is dance and therefore it's dance, because we had all these things to cross reference, and that's how the work has progressed. In 2001, a young filmmaker joined us who was equally interested in development, and he started a television and film unit. And as the woman who was introducing me said, we have done many thousands of hours of television programming talking of the same issues of human rights and violence and educating the girl child, but using music videos and using quiz shows and using fiction and non-fiction and chat shows. And I think what excites me the most about the work at Darpana is that we have the possibility of this integration, of breaking out, of integrating again, of bringing a collaborator in, because the one thing I think I have been able to sustain since I have been administering Darpana is an openness of spirit. You can be an expert in something, but be open to learning many other things and constantly learning new things and bringing it into your game. And I think this has been the spirit which I constantly try to rekindle.
Open to the new things coming your way and just adapting to them is something that is really phenomenal, and a quality that we all see in you, definitely. So while we are on this subject, if you could also share some of the challenges while integrating all this, because I know that there was, which happens in KCC also, that we also have performing arts, visual arts, folk arts, culinary arts, but then we see that okay, the common agenda is capacity building, for example. So that time we forget that what is the art form that we are going to take forward to address the capacity building. But at the same time, sometimes there are challenges. Sometimes we feel that okay, one art form got more preference from us for some reason which is not maybe intentional. So if there are some challenges that you faced, if you could throw some light on them.
There are always challenges. There are challenges in the kind of work we do. For instance, if you are doing a project for the slums, it is important that slum dwellers do not think these are some upper class elite types who have come to give us gyan, or rural audiences don't feel that here are city folk who really know nothing about us coming to tell us something. So one of the things we have tried to do is, if there is a particular setting at which we are aiming a project, we try and get people from that setting, train them, scale up their skill levels, create with them, and then send them back to perform. And I think this has been a successful, although difficult, process, but we have done it across India and in both rural areas and in slum areas and in areas which are difficult. So for instance, if it's an Adivasi project and we are trying to, UNICEF wanted us to go into the Dangs, which is this highly Adivasi, very culturally rich area, because children were petrified of vaccination, for instance. And they said that the minute they see a UNICEF or a doctor's vehicle come in, they all disappear into the forest and there's nobody in the village for 3 days. So can you do something? So we went in there, we went around the villages looking for talented performers who wanted to do something different. We brought them to Darpana, we did an orientation, we told them to tell us their stories, which we rewove into a story about vaccination. So for instance, a mother says she will not have her child vaccination, and their main deity comes into her dreams and says, why are you trying to kill my child? You know, I'm just giving a simplistic example, but things like that, which can only come if you work with the local people, because they know their lore, they know their songs, they know what is familiar. So the point is to develop something which is familiar and unfamiliar. If it's only familiar, then it becomes boring. You still want to say something to them. So that is how we work, and that is how we have worked with a lot of rural areas. For instance, with the Babuji Ka Pad painters in Rajasthan, when we were doing a project in Rajasthan, we went to the painters and we had them create new pads with the same characters talking about issues we wanted to talk about, which is the girl child and the treatment of the girl child and the education of the girl child. So they created, it looks like a comic book, the whole, I mean, I don't mean in the comedy sense, but it's that kind of a graphic painting, which usually a husband and wife sing and dance and play, and we had them create new things. This also gives the possibility of these folk artists seeing a new way that their folk art can survive, and I think that's another very important agenda for us.
We also face this in our organization, that the kind of work your team had been doing, how do you train them? How do you, of course, empowering is also part of the training, but at times we juggle with this question that they're learning on the job, they're discovering new things, and that is how they're growing. But at times that constant question challenges that, is there training that we can provide, the structured training? How have you been doing this at Darpana?
Reena, it's not easy, and you need to constantly change because technology changes, mindsets change. The younger people in today's generation have a completely different idea of loyalty or commitment or the way their time should be spent and so on. So we end up doing a lot of hand holding and talking to people and seeing how we can motivate them continuously, and it's difficult, it's time consuming, it's emotionally exhaustive, but when it works, it's hugely rewarding. So for instance, I had a meeting with the entire staff this morning, and I said that, you know, we are coming out of COVID, all our classes are online, our performances have to find a way of getting to audiences differently, and we need to all up our game because it's a different world again. So these are the projects that we would like to do this year, and we are going to tell you. So for instance, if you are dealing with sound, we want you to research every single way your sound could be made better, so recordings are made better. What are the kind of microphones? You are all computer literate or become computer literate, but tell me in 5 days or 7 days, this is what we have learned. If this mic is placed in this way, or if this boom is held in this way, then you don't have the kind of crackle that you might get, or if you tweak this slightly, this will happen. But I demand it, and my artistic director Yadavan Chandran, who started the Darpana Communications, is very much somebody who is constantly learning himself, and I think the fact that people see that he is constantly learning himself and upping his game, whether it's in camera or lighting or technology, I think gives them a great fillip. I am an eternal learner. I am always learning, not necessarily technology oriented, but I am always learning a new language. Or 2 years ago, I decided that I really wanted to work with drummers, and drummers couldn't move, so the dancers would become drummers. So we did 1 year of Chenda lessons and created a show called Mother River, in which 5 or 7 women are playing on these enormous drums, and it was such an exhilarating and liberating movement. And a moment for us. And the funny thing I noticed is, this was when the construction of the new theatre was just getting complete, and there were still labor women who were there. And at every rehearsal, I saw that the minute we started drumming, the minute they saw these women going at it with these huge drums, they would just stand up straighter. And it was just so beautiful to see that, because that's one of the glass ceilings, that women don't drum, and if they drum, they'll do it on the tabla, not on enormous drums. And it's things like this that give us the joy of learning new things and of saying, okay, I don't understand this, teach me. But it's a 24-hour process.
Okay. Moving on. So we briefly spoke when you asked us that how we promote our program, which is something that again constantly all arts leader that I speak with or artists I speak with constantly jiggle with that. Sometimes they feel that it is because of the money that they are not able to do a good job as they wish in promoting their organizations or their artwork. So we also notice that many a times some good work is being done, but it is not reaching to a larger audience and is staying confined to limited people. So what are your experiences in this area, that what needs to be done to make one's work reach to a larger audience and create more impact?
Reena, I don't know. We are learning on a daily basis how to spread the word, and now with our not being able to go out there to perform, it's become even more important, and we still don't have an answer. We are constantly trying. At the beginning of the pandemic, so many of my dancer colleagues and friends were very depressed, so we really wanted to do something, and we worked and we created a piece called Dance Unlocked, which was with 22 dancers of ranging from 25 years old to Kumundini Lakhya, who is 90, and they were all stuck in their homes, and most of them had never used a camera on the phone before, so it was a whole learning process with the other one, teaching them how to hold the camera, what angle, how far, okay, this frame would be great, etc., etc. But that reached close to 3.5 lakh people. Now, I don't know what process it was that reached it. Was it that all 22 dancers were also sending it into them and then they were sending it on and so on? I don't know, but I don't have an answer, and if any of the people watching this has an answer, please share it with me.
Yeah, I think we can take a break now and show the presentation that you had prepared for the audience.
Okay, I can show you Dance Unlocked. Vasant, can we show them Dance Unlocked? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to show you Dance Unlocked first, and then I'm going to talk of another piece and show that to you as well.
Lovely, lovely.
Unlocked. पीठ रही गई છે. So you see, that has a Calcutta connection as well. Tanmay was amazing. I just phoned him and I said, I love this piece of yours called Rivulets of Innocence, and can I use it? And he said, of course you can use it. And as a matter of fact, in the drumming exercise that I was talking about earlier, also Tanmay came and helped us with that. And I continue working with Tanmay, and but you see how we went to the dancers and we said, find us one word that in some senses is reflective of what you feel at the moment, and tell us one color. And it was extraordinary because these are dancers who would never be on the same platform. You know, why would Kumudini Ben be on the same platform as my son, for instance? You know, they're completely different generations. There are 2 generations in between. These are dancers who would perhaps not even know each other's works, and they were so generous. And you know, they had no idea what we were going to do, but we sent them a piece of music and we said, create to it, and we want one section of 8 and one section of 4 beats and one section of just 1 beat. And it was just such an amazing feeling of comradeship, which is rare in the kind of competition, and the competition for getting that festival to sponsor us or that sponsor to sponsor us. It's something that real life doesn't necessarily always foster, but I think here we could foster it, and it was an amazing experience.
Very compelling, and of course it reminded me of the loss we had of Astad Debu, and
Absolutely.
I can't get over that. And so one of our audience had given a comment on this piece that about your statement that how it could reach to so many audience. Sayan is saying that it's superb. No wonder why it reached out to so many people. It's the content and the dedication that the artist had depicted through their movements. Kudos to the team. So it's the content which is the king. Lovely. Okay. You touched a bit on the part which is always troubling all the arts people, which is funding. So you said about Darpana, of course, you had a strategy by supporting Darpana's work with your own earnings from your performances and groups' performances. What do you think, with your experience, that how important is government advocacy in the development of an institution, and what are the areas that need to be addressed by them?
You know, it's very funny. All through the pandemic and the lockdown, every single person, from the biggest corporate honcho to the migrant who was walking on the streets, was being sustained by the arts. They were listening to songs, they were looking at things, they were reading books. This is the arts. And yet not one conversation has come out. Not one person has mentioned that not only are the arts suffering, but what about the little man in some village whose entire life has gone in making ghungroos? Where does he go? Where does the woman go who weaves the saris that goes into the practice saris of every Bharatanatyam child? Where does the leather tannery go that makes the leather, that makes the drums that play for us? So, you know, you're talking of a whole community, or you only see us, but behind us is the work of hundreds of people. My personal experience with government funding is that there is always an agenda, and it depends entirely on the person sitting on a particular seat at a particular time. If the person is somebody who understands the art and genuinely wants to support it, a huge amount of difference can be made. But usually we know the corruption levels in this country, we know the levels of favoritism in this country, and therefore the arts never get sustained. One of the things I was doing with Star TV in the 90s was running a program which brought the arts from the farthest places onto Star TV, and the program was so successful that people would write in to us and say, you know, I've been going to Guwahati twice every month, and now that you are telling me that this festival is going to happen, I adjust my schedule to be able to do this. And that is the sort of thinking we require. There is no point in our saying that the arts have to sustain themselves. They cannot. They absolutely cannot, because the amount of time that goes into riyaz and talim and research, where is the money going to come from? How much are you going to charge a student? And perhaps I don't want to teach. There has to be, if this country values its art, there has to be a new organization started where corporates and high network individuals put the money in, but an organization that is professionally run, where the statute is very clear on what percentage goes to whom. The arts in Britain was saved when it was decided by the government that a certain percent of lottery funding would go to the arts. And I remember being there when this decision was taken, and the complete fillip in the thing. We put a cess for cows. Is that more important, or is the arts more important? According to me, the arts are more important, because the only way in which India is unique is because of our culture, not because of our cows. Our cows are actually doing better in Brazil than they are doing here. We feed them plastic. What is the cess on cows going to do? But nobody is thinking this through. We will always be an also ran country. Yes, our roads are good enough, but not as good as X. Yes, our factories are good enough, but not producing. Yes, China is always doing better. But the Chinese cannot compete with the plurality of our culture, our language, our cuisine, our weaves, our stories, our everything. And this is what this country, and I blame the corporates as much as I blame the government, because money is not flowing in any consistently thought of matter into this field, and it will die. We have folk arts dying every day. We have languages dying every day. And this is a dire need, and it's a need that people must understand as the only thing that is truly Indian. Nothing else is Indian. Our culture is, and our culture is plural. Our culture is all over the place. There is no high culture and low culture. The folk arts and tribal arts are as important as what we are doing, and all of these need to be made sustainable in a way that this entire bouquet is available for the world heritage. Sorry to become so angry.
Absolutely, your anger is quite justified, and it's all over. It's in all of us, in some way or the other. And also, what you said about, one thing is the funding coming, and second thing is the distribution of that fund. You see that the distribution fund is also so crazy. There is no policy. You really can't question anything. You don't know how it is being given, and the quality, how it is being judged. There are no processes or policies made in a way that are understandable. There's so much of space to play with.
Obfuscation and lack of transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. So you really don't know how some people are getting fund, and then we don't even know how much fund is there, first of all, and what are the way. And there's some people who are constantly getting the funding because they are maybe in good books with those people who are distributing the funding, and some phenomenal work are really not being given any kind of support. I was enjoying reading your bio. I was just going through some of your work. I loved this one thing I shared with my daughter also, that you did a study in management because you wanted to know why the people become dishonest in business. That's phenomenal. Tell me something about it. And and also moving on from that, my question to you is actually that of course there is CSR, but there is the art is not there in CSR directly.
It is arts and cultural preservation and encouragement is there, and arts education is also there. So encouraging arts is also there in some that kind of way.
That's what. So what happens when I also speak with the corporates, it becomes like they understand health very easy, so they know they have to put a camp and support some health thing. But when it comes to supporting arts, they really don't understand, first of all, that how conservation, what is it. So they look for easy thing like health, like education. Chalo humne school khol diya, bachcho ko yahan pe padhai ho gaya. So that is a much easier way, simple way for them to deal with CSR. But when it comes to arts, they really themselves are not enabled to understand that how to support art and why to support. First of all, the reason why is not clear to them, because health and education is very clear, because there had been a lot of campaign on these things, but then there were no campaign to that extent.
But we are still the most uneducated and unhealthy society after 70 years of saying that these are our crucial areas, and the arts are still surviving. So when a President Clinton comes, you don't take him to a factory, you get one of us to come and perform for him. That is thought of. But they don't see the back linkages. They don't see that, okay, Mallika Sarabhai is up there, she's made her career, but where are the Mallika Sarabhais behind me all the way till somebody who's 6 years old and wants to nurture this passion?
Absolutely. So what do you see is the role of corporate funding that they should start, or is there any way that to educate corporates, there should be any seminars to bring them together and tell them about the support which is needed? What are your thoughts on all this? What are the way forward? Because we know the struggle.
25 years ago, I was working quite a lot in England and was watching how the English government, the lottery funding came in, and they had something called ABSA, Arts and Business Society and something it was. But it was basically an organization to bring the arts and corporate funding and corporate thinking together, and some very interesting studies were done. One of them was with one of the banks, I can't remember, it was either Lloyd's or Grindlays or one of these banks. They started a competition for A-level students just before they finished school for the best classical musicians. So there was a violin category, and there was a category of pianists, and there was a category of opera singers and so on. And this was at a time when children were about 17, 16 years old, and this scholarship was constantly being talked about and children competed for it and so on. And they found that 2 years later or a year later, when the child was opening her first bank account, her first thought was that bank. Now this makes great business sense. We know in many instances, I mean, look at the cricket matches, it's the same thing. If you have a sustained, you see, the word is sustained. People want an immediate answer. They want a festival, but they don't want to sustain what will make artists be able to participate in the festival. So I think corporates need to come together and understand that a funding mechanism which is transparent, which is fair, and which is run by professionals, not the funder's husband or wife or niece or nephew, which is what happens, or not the sister-in-law of the IAS officer who happens to be in place. You know exactly what I am talking about. But a group of people who know what they are talking about and have no personal axe to grind, who can actually sit down for a year and think of a strategy to sustain all these forms of art, to be able to help these people scale up so that they can market the arts. I mean, when Rajiv Gandhi started the zonal centers, this was the idea. And what has happened to the zonal centers? Nothing. I don't know what the zonal centers are doing. They used to get in those years 5 crores, which was a huge amount of money. And our zonal center is in Udaipur. I have visited them in the early years. They do nothing. They do some small festival, but there is no sustained thinking of what a zonal center should be doing. Recently, about 10 years ago, I was trying to get artists from Eastern India and the Northeast here. I was constantly calling the East Zone Center. Nothing. No information, no need to see that artists come here. You know, so it's a waste of time to give it to an IAS officer who thinks it's a bad job to be in the arts in the first place. You know, so that is not the answer. Yes, the government must put in some funding as well, but they have to put it in a place which is a corporation, which makes a corpus to be able to give out, where people can question it, where people can send proposals. They need to train people how to write up proposals, how to see the research aspect of it, how to see the production aspect of it. You know, it's as complicated as the best education, and you need to think of it. Now, we have failed even with our education, so where is the hope?
Research in science. We give importance to science in our country, but we don't give importance to research. For research, you have to depend on international organizations. All our scientists go abroad to do the
Exactly.
research work, which is another failure that we have. And I'll now take some of the audience questions because we have last 10 minutes left. Okay. There's one. Okay, with the COVID situation, digital media became our savior. What do you think is the future of performing arts? And are there any new regulations? How the digital performances and digital spaces are going to hold the future?
You know, we need to reinvent performances for the digital era. That's exactly what we are doing in Darpana just now, and I hope to have our first one out very quickly. We have taken a performance that I used to do live and we have completely rethought of it for the digital. So how do you take the interesting element of a live performance, but how do you add to that experience, because a camera can move, for instance, and an audience doesn't move? So how do you create a new genre? And I think more and more of us are going to have to think like this, because just sitting a camera in front of a performance and showing it is just not doing it, because you're missing the presence of a live audience, you're missing the presence of a actor 5 feet away from you, and you are seeing it as something that is distant. And I don't think that is the answer, but we are all trying to figure out an answer. I don't have one yet.
Yeah, and also that the second part is that as most of the population does not have access to internet and hence loses the agency, so it's even more complicated than what we think actually.
It is indeed.
Okay. There is another question. Which are the areas you feel you wish some other arts people could focus on?
Some other arts people could focus on.
Yeah.
I think, like we did with Darpana and then in creating Dance Unlocked, we need to think outside our silos. We are artists, we are communicators. It doesn't matter that my language is dance or theatre or music. It doesn't matter that your language is painting. It doesn't matter that a painter in Bengal is doing something else. How do we cross over? How do we create new forms by a crossover that may not otherwise be possible? 3 nights ago, I was in a panel discussion organized by the Guild of Women Theatre Activists in America. They give away a prize for women who work in the field of theatre and development, and there was a panel discussion, and on the panel were 5 people from 5 different continents. Now this has been made possible by the digital era. We have to see how we can get those add-ons to work for our advantage rather than a disadvantage. And I think the field is clear. We need to put our thinking caps on. Now, if you don't have 2 square meals, it becomes very difficult to put your thinking cap on, or in my case, if I'm worrying where salaries are coming from, it becomes difficult, but we still have to do it. You have one question left.
Okay. So there is another question. As digital medium is also taking away the works of laborers who are associated with live performances, how do you see the future of them? How does the policy making cater the arts in digital media? I think digital is the key today.
I think we are not going to only stay digital. I think we are going to go back to performances where there is a live audience. We will have to rethink how to do it. At Natrani, our audience, our venue, we have restarted with some graduating performances where people are kept at safe distances, where we have only 100 people, because that is what is allowed here just now, though the capacity is 400. Ideally, we should be able to do something with 200 people, but what happens is the funding goes wrong, because the cost of putting on a performance, the cost of inviting artists hasn't gone down, the airfares haven't gone down, the hotels haven't gone down, but with only half the tickets being sold, even with a full house you still couldn't break even without support, but with only half the tickets, how do you make it happen? So I think we are going back to a time of intimate sabhas and intimate performances till we find a way out.
New journey that we are all starting from here, and we all are going to reinvent, rediscover as we go forward. Although in our country, to some extent, a lot of things have started because people really can't afford to not go out and work with each other. So I see that there is a lot of people coming together and starting to work. So we hope that it won't stay digital for long because our country can't really afford it. Problem is that it's a privileged thing to be having a mask on. It's a privileged thing to have social distance. Our transportation systems are not fit enough to support the population that we have and to maintain the social distances. So all those things are quite still Western and privileged countries things. We are still struggling. Only a few of us who have the cars and can go independently. It's fine. But even in our workspaces, that we take all precautions in KCC. But at the same time, at the end of it, people have to come together to be able to work. So these things, I really don't know. I hope that we get over with it as soon as possible. We have two more questions. I think we will take last these two. The corporate look only at return on investment, and that's why it's difficult to bring them in. What are the ways that we can catch their interest in arts by showing an attractive ROI?
I don't know. If I have an answer, I will let you know. I don't know. I've tried for 40 years for corporate funding and have not succeeded. They all love me. When they are in the audience, they all come and say what wonderful work you are doing. But when it comes to wallets, it's a different question. Your last question.
Absolutely. And I'll just add here one thing that, I was speaking with somebody in Australia about this ROI thing. So while talking, that person suddenly started talking, that if you're putting in your effort in this direction, that there is no ROI. I'm thinking, my effort, ROI, when I put effort, I don't even think about ROI, my ROI. I always think of giving ROI to others. So they said, no, but you are investing your time, you're investing your organization's time and energy.
Different way of thinking.
ROI for you. So that's now how we think. Okay. The last question is, a lot of time, even with full capacity performances, we do not reach break even. How beginning organizations can stay afloat?
With a song and a prayer, I think. I think in this country there aren't any other answers, and we just hope that there are enough people who will still want the art, so that if I go out with a begging bowl with a 71-year-old institution, somebody will drop something, but I still go out with a begging bowl. I'm sorry to be disappointing, but that is the reality. Reena, I have another Zoom meeting to go to. It's been wonderful, all the best, and I hope you continue with the series, and that in another 3 months we have some better answers.
Definitely.
Thank you
so much. Just leave us with your last words for the people who are going to be listening, even not only today, but even in future also.
We must overcome. If we want to save this country and save humanity, the arts are the only thing that will save our souls, so we must overcome. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Didi, for being here today. And I'm sure many others, young people and performers like me, have got the encourage in learning from today. As an artist, we all need to think and reflect what is happening around us in socio-political sectors. I want to thank our audience for joining on the talk 1 of Artist Entrepreneur Session 2. And before finishing, I would like to announce the next talk of Artist Entrepreneur, which is on 9th February. This is going to happen with Mr. Joy Chandran Palazzi, Artist Director of Artpreneur Center for Movement Arts. Thank you all for joining. A very good evening. Stay safe. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.